I'm right with you. What happens next? I'm a big believer in humor, big believer in making people laugh. So how do we make it funny? And then at the end of the story, we explain to the audience what's the point. Cool.
With the uh, expand session was the first time that I met you, and in person. I met you online as you were doing a training segment for a lot of the speakers who were coming to that event. And one thing that it was very clear and evident was your ability when you got up on stage to be able to really command control of the room. And I thought that
Mhm.
was really cool. And how long have you been, a public speaker for?
So, I was a child theater kid. So I was on the stage on the spotlight second grade. And high school, I was in the competitive speech team. And right out of university, as soon as I found you can make a living as a professional speaker, I got right into it, early 20s.
Oh wow. I didn't know that they had, I did football, rugby, and wrestling. I did not know we had competitive speech teams. So
Yeah,
so
some
where
schools call it debate team.
oh, debate team. Okay,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, mine was speech team. I went to school in Carbondale, Illinois, America, and there would be different events that you can compete in. So the one's called dramatic interpretation, one's called humorous interpretation, one's called original comedy, and they were all 8-minute presentations scored by a judge, and I did very, very well in it.
That sounds so cool. I would have loved to have done that. I wish we had that at our school. It's interesting that, what in a school system, what you can be presented to can create so many opportunities that maybe you wouldn't see so early on. For me, I really started picking up the speaking thing really later in life. It wasn't until probably I spent time with Grant Cardone that I realized that the importance of speaking. And I'd always been somebody who'd really focused in on sales as and I knew sales was so important. You got to close deals, but to get escalation in your business, the idea of marketing being senior to sales was something that Grant really illuminated in my brain. And that it's just been something that's been on fire ever since. And when I saw you at the Expand, I was like, I got to have this guy on my podcast because, the way that you really talked through what people need to do when they're thinking about getting on stages. I keep on thinking all these people who are guests on my show need you desperately. And because they don't have their pitch, they don't have their program. And we really sort of on the fly kind of start building it before they get on. And because they don't have a program. And so you're desperately needed in the market, my friend.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm happy to help. Yeah, most people don't know where to start. Uh, they don't know where to start, how to get on a stage. And I was just talking to a gentleman this morning. He's a functional medicine doctor, works with over 1,000 people in the last 12 years. And he was saying the same thing I hear so often, who am I to give a speech? Why would anybody want to hear from me? There's lots of other speakers out there telling similar information. And to that, I say, if you have wisdom to share that people can benefit from, even if it's just one person in the audience and it could change their life, then who are you not to share this information? And it was one speech that changed my mother's life that really made me realize the power of a single presentation. And my mother wasn't even in the room. There was a doctor in Carbondale, Illinois, giving a free workshop on how the food you eat affects your mental health. And my mother was struggling with some mental health issues. And my mother's friend sat in this presentation and had the idea that she should tell my mom to call this presenter. So she goes home, she calls my mom, she
Mm.
says, "Hey, I just sat through a free workshop. I really think you should book an appointment with this natural doctor in Carbondale, Illinois." So my mother says, okay. She books the call. That appointment changed her life. That information that my mother got from that doctor about how to be healthy through food changed my life because at the time I was eating like crap. I didn't know any better. I just thought organic meant expensive, and I didn't really
Mm.
know what to do with fruits and vegetables. Everything I was eating was microwavable, coming in a package. That's just, we ate for convenience and flavor, right? And so that kind of started a health journey for me, and it's benefited my children. So I don't even know the name of this one doctor to thank in Carbondale, Illinois. And my mother wasn't even in the room, but you can see the power of just sharing what might actually feel like basic common knowledge to you because you're an expert, but to some people, it's life changing.
The idea that you can change somebody's life a third party like that, where you're not even in the room and it just um, the message gets propagated. That's like that's one of those legendary things that if you have that in you and you have that story in you that you need to get out, that you think you need to get out, you have to understand that there's somebody out there who needs it, and you've got an obligation. Like, I think one thing that I've heard many times is success is my duty, my obligation, my responsibility. And I think in this situation you have a responsibility to get that message out because somebody needs you. And why are you holding back? So
Now,
I know there's a lot of times what people do is they look at, cool, I want to get that message out and I want to get on stage. And they're like, I hear this all the time. Like, I want to get on stages and I want people to pay me to be there. And, I want to do all these things. And that sounds amazing until you start getting into the process of all the little traps that happen along the way, to try to get yourself set up. What would you say maybe is the first thing that they're going to run into as a problem about getting on stage?
well, the first thing they're going to run into is their own limiting beliefs. As I mentioned before,
Mm-hmm.
they're going to tell themselves, who am I? Other people are out there already giving information like this. Why would anybody want me? Or they're going to not know where to start. They're going to say,
Mm-hmm.
I talked to this guy this morning. He's been in business 12 years. He's had over 1,000 patients. And he said to me, I don't know anybody. And, it's kind of funny. Like, you just told me you've worked with 1,000 people. Like, 1,000 people, right? So I think people don't see all the opportunities. And, myself, once I realized that there's so many speaking opportunities, and in fact, there's more speaking opportunities now than there ever has been before, because we have new platforms. We have social media, we have YouTube, we have podcasts, we have webinars, we have online summits. We have, there's a Rotary Club meeting down the street every single week, and they're looking for a new speaker every single week. There's a Chamber of Commerce meeting every month. They're looking for a new speaker every month. So they're everywhere. Um, so the first roadblock is not seeing all the opportunities and not believing that you are someone that should be speaking to audiences. Is they are not prepared to have the conversation with the event organizer. So you can imagine how someone could just stop dead in their tracks if the event organizer was blunt enough to say, why should we have you as our speaker? Pretty basic
Yeah, I
question.
think that I
And if
think
you're not
you
answering, yeah.
yeah, so I think when we look at the first one, the idea is I agree with you. I think, and this happens a lot in sales, and I think in the marketing of speaking, and really it's a sales perspective as well because you're selling a concept. I mean, if even if you don't have a product and you're just there to influence somebody to make the right decisions around food, you're still selling something. You're selling a concept on that, and they're like, why would somebody want to buy that concept from me? Why would somebody think that I'm good? And they're like, great, okay, I've got past that. Now they've got to get to the next thing of, okay, now I've got to actually convince somebody that they need to believe in me in doing that. And so they go out and they're like, okay, I know that there's an event coordinator, or there's somebody who's going to help organize the event, speaker, booking person. They're sitting in front of that person. They're going to be like, oh my gosh, now I have to really believe in myself and actually push that. So what are some of the tool sets that they could use to kind of start to get themselves ready to be able to do that before the meeting, and then maybe during the meeting, and maybe after?
So I recommend building a speaker promotion kit. And mine is a simple Google Doc, nothing fancy. It doesn't need to be super flashy, but it answers the questions that you're going to get asked every time you speak. So every time you speak anywhere, they're going to ask, can you send me a picture, a headshot? Can you send me your social media links? Can you send me a title of the talk you're going to give? Can you send me a description of the talk that you're going to give? And can you send me a bio? Title, description, bio, social media links, and a picture. They're going to ask for that every single time. And so you might as well put that together. Then during the meeting with the person, the mistake people make is they come in and they say, I speak about this topic and you should have me as a speaker. The chance of that working is slim, because the likelihood is the response is going to be either they're going to say, we already had a speaker like that last week, or that's not exactly what we're looking for, and you miss the mark. And so then you get a no. So instead of saying, here's what I got, do you want it? Instead, ask, say, tell me about your group. Tell me about your event. Tell me about what's the audience looking for? What are the challenges the audience is experiencing? And what specific topics are you looking to be covered by a speaker? And they will tell you exactly what they're looking for. And then you can determine, is that what you cover? Now, let's say, for example, you're going in to talk about sales, and they say, we're looking for someone on time management. Well, guess what? You need to be successful in sales. You need to be good at time management. Or let's say they say, we're looking for mindsets, mindset for success. Well, guess what? If you're good at sales, you got a lot to say about mindsets. And so whatever topic you think you're the expert on, there's probably 12 other topics that you're also an expert on because you're an expert in the area that you're an expert on. So it's much more successful to ask, what are you looking for? So that you can say, great, I'd be happy to speak on that. That's exactly what I do. And then following the conversation, once they've agreed to have you as the speaker, the mistake people make is to think they've been hired for a 60-minute performance or a 30-minute performance. That's just a small fraction of what's possible. What's much more effective, and Steve, I know you're a master at this yourself, is to think about this speaking opportunity as the beginning of a lifelong relationship with the audience, with the community. You think years in advance, think the whole network you're here to serve. Instead of you're showing up, you're doing your 30-minute performance, and you're getting back in your car and you're heading out. That's such a limited perspective of what the opportunity is to serve. So I think of every speaking engagement as the beginning of a lifelong potential relationship with that organization.
Yeah, I think that's so critically important. I think you really hit the nail on the head when you're going out and talking to the event planner, and is really, first of all, going in with the objective of serving them. And in doing so, if you come in and say, this is exactly what I do before figuring out what they need, you're not going to be congruent. You're basically rolling the dice. You're putting everything on black 36 at the roulette table and hoping that it hits. Whereas if you said, hey, look, what specifically are you looking for? Well, we're looking for A, B, and C. And if that hits, with a slight adjacent to what you do, being able to make that pivot and bring them the success that they're looking for, I think is so intrinsic to finding success in any sales situation, let alone just, selling yourself as a speaker situation. And then further to that is looking that into saying that this is something where, this is an opening. This is not a close. This is an opening to a relationship, as you say, is a lifelong endeavor with the event planner, with the constituents that are attending the event. I think that in the other vendors potentially are also there as well. I think that is a beautiful thing because it's not necessarily just the speaking. Now, when people are looking at speaking, I know there's a lot of different ways that they can make money from speaking. What are some of the things that you think are the easy ones that people generally focus on? And what are the ones that they miss when it comes to speaking at events?
The easy what that they focus
Easy
on?
ways for people to, first of all, the easy wins for making money as a speaker. And then,
Okay.
what people generally point to. And what are some of the ones that they miss as opportunities as a speaker?
Okay, cool. So when I entered into the speaking profession, I thought the way to get paid as a speaker is to ask for a payment and have a fee. And the problem was I was networking with other quote unquote professional speakers, and we would say, what's your fee? Oh, my fee's $5,000 and my fee's $10,000. And what I didn't realize is that most of those people who were charging a fee for their speech were not making hardly any money.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seemed like I was like, man, I want to get $5,000 for a speech or $10,000 for a speech. Meanwhile, I'm getting $25 Starbucks gift cards from presentations or people saying it's good exposure, but we don't have a budget for you. And I just didn't know what to do. And my professional speaking colleagues were saying, you have to have fee integrity and you have to, tell them this is how you make your living and you deserve to get paid $5,000 a speech. Well, Every year, the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers has a conference. And there's one meeting that you're only allowed in if you make only over $350,000. It's called the High Income Earner Speaker Meeting. And I remember standing outside the door with there was a sign, this is the high income earner. And I was just wondering, who's behind the door and what are they talking about? And one year I did so well, I made over $350,000 and I went into the room. And I felt like an imposter because the way I got into that room was I made a majority of my income, almost all of it, from selling coaching and courses. And so I thought, I'm not a real high income earner speaker because I didn't earn this income from speaking. Now, how did I sell the courses and the coaching? I sold it from speaking. And I get into this room, there's 12 people. There's 12 people out of 500 members making over $350,000. Every single one of them is making a majority of their income from non-speaking revenue, but they're generating
Mm.
that revenue because they're speaking. So this kind of blew my mind, and it made me realize this is how you make the real money in speaking, is you don't necessarily charge for speaking. Now, if someone reaches out to you and says, "What's your speaking fee?" You can tell them $5,000, or you can tell them, "I'm happy to work within your budget." And they say, "Our budget's 2,500." You say, "I work with that," whatever. But the real fortune to be made in speaking, this was the big mindset shift for me, is to not think the money's in the checkbook of the event organizer, but the money's in the pockets of the people in the audience. So
Yeah.
now if you think about your speech not as the product to sell, but think about your speech as the marketing for you to make an offer. Now, of course, there's a lot to know, a lot of mistakes you can make in terms of making an offer from the stage. But
Yeah.
that one mindset is the one that made me rich. And the one that I teach my clients is speak to sell. Don't sell the speech, speak to sell a product, a service, a program, a course, because the speech then acts as a preview of what it might look like to work with you. Of course, the speech should still be very
And
valuable, very informative, but
yeah.
always make an offer because there's people in the audience who want to go further.
Well, I think that, a lot of times what people do is they get into the mode if they're in the audience and they listen to something that hits them of value. And there's a lot of different ways to hit a value, emotively or logically or any of the other ways that our brain works. If they hear something like that, the next logical thing for them to do is to say, what am I going to do with this information that I have? And I could either A, just say, oh, that was interesting, and then walk into the next presentation, or I could say, that is interesting. I need to do more with this. How do I do the next thing? And if you're really hitting the needle, people are going to say, I'm ready for that next step. What does that look like? And I think that is super, super interesting as a process for people to really get into it. And I think you do a great job of that. I know, in the last
Yeah,
one, you hit a good number of, I think there was X amount of people in the room. They had, 500, 1,000 people in the room, and you converted, I think, 100 of them into, people who came to the next event. And of those, a certain number of them went to the next level with your business, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
yeah,
And the thing is, it's not a Majeed only movement. You look at somebody like Gary Vee, you look at somebody like Ty Lopez, Grant Cardone, Tony Robbins. They all do the exact same process, which is they will do a speech, and that speech, the goal of the speech is to provide an immense, not a small amount of value. And that was the reason why I wanted to have you come on the podcast, is because when you did the speech up front, you didn't do like, hey, I'm going to tell you a little bit, and then I'm going to block all of the everything behind a paywall. What you said is, here's 4 or 5 things you're going to do to be successful. And by doing those 4 or 5 things, tomorrow you could do it and never see me again. And that's going to have value for you. So that's the
yeah,
value that I'm going to drop on the thing. And then, oh, by the way, if you want to learn more, to go to the next level where somebody's going to help you, somebody's going to be with you, you can go on to here or here or here, whatever it was, as the next jumping point. Then the people who want to take secondary action, they can do that.
yeah.
But people can walk away with true value. And that's what I loved about the way that you did your presentation. And that's why I was like, you've got to be on this podcast.
Great. No, well, that means a lot coming from you because I know you're building your business through presentations as well. and you've sat through a
Yeah.
lot of presentations and probably bought a lot. I'm a bit of a people pleaser, Steve. So I do want everybody to like me and be happy at the end of my presentation. I love the pat on the back and love your presentations. I'm feeling great hearing your feedback.
Mhm.
And I believe there's people in that audience that are just never going to buy from me. And I want to give them my best stuff and hope that they're going to implement. I want to give them actionable, implementable information. And I don't believe that unsells. I don't believe the myth, I'll call it a myth, that if you give them too much good information that they're not going to buy from you, that they're going to think, well, geez, I can do this on my own. Because my belief is that I don't think you need to make people feel like there's no way I can do this by myself. I just think that there are people in the audience who know I want to do this and I don't want to do it by myself. I want to do this with an expert, following a process, someone holding my hand. I know I'm not going to do this on my own. I know I don't want to do this on my own.
Mhm.
And this guy speaking clearly has a process that works. I want to show that I clearly have a process that works. And if people choose to attempt my process
Yeah.
on their own, good for them. If people choose to hire me to implement the process with them, that's great too. I'll tell you what's helped me sell a lot more from the stage. I used to think that I give a value packed presentation and then I do a super cool sales pitch with features and benefits and discounts and bonuses. And that never really worked for me. And what I found worked a lot better is to think of the whole presentation as an invitation and think of all of the stories that I'm telling as an opportunity for my potential client to feel what it's like to work with me. So the way I do
Mhm.
that is when I tell stories, I talk about clients that I work with, the challenges that they're experiencing, and me saying to them, hey, don't worry, I got you. Let's do this. We work together. And then they get extraordinary results. They call me up and they say, Majeed, I just made $100,000 at my presentation. I'm gonna, buy a new home and a new boat. And wow, this changed my life. And then in hearing that story, the feeling my ideal client is going to feel is, wow, I want that. I'm
Yeah, and
teaching,
that
I'm giving valuable
yeah.
principles, and I'm bringing up this emotion to the stories.
Yeah, the storytelling I think is so important. I think a lot of people, I see them come on this podcast or they'll go on others and they do exactly what you just said, which is one of the biggest perils of getting on stage, which is I'm going to go out and I'm going to grab one of my products and I'm going to feature slam you with everything like the Sham Wow guy and
Yeah.
just hard sell you from stage and you're going to buy my stuff. And that never works. So the idea of building trust is really number one, giving you your best stuff, but number two, giving it in a form that they can digest. In a form that people digest and people love is a good story. Trillions of dollars have been made in telling stories. It's one of the oldest things that we do as a human being is get around the fire and tell stories. When our kids go to sleep, we tell them stories. When we go to the Hollywood blockbuster, we're listening to a story. And so one of the things you did a great job of was definitely telling stories. And look, in this podcast, you've already told I don't know how many stories in this podcast. So it's just inculcated into the way that you communicate. And I think that's really a great way to help people to relate to the things that you're doing is by telling them a story.
Yeah.
And so when you're taking somebody who is, first of all, they've worked on their personal brand, they've got that speaker kit ready, they know, maybe 3, 4, 5 different versions of the story that they can tell, the way that their speaking is going to go. And then they're like, okay, now they want to get it in a framework of it can be digestible in telling a story. In your mind, what makes a good story?
You can see it, feel it, touch it, smell it. So that means it's sensational. A great story, I believe, is told in the present tense. So there I was. I'll
Mm.
never forget the day. I'm standing on the side of the road, pouring down rain. Cars are driving by. We're with you, right? So you're like reliving it, and people can feel it. They're there. It's so good you can't look away. Because we have to remember, we're competing with distractions. We're competing with vibrating phones in the pants. We're competing with wandering thoughts. A great story, I can't look away. I'm right with you. What happens next? I'm a big believer in humor. big believer in making people laugh. So how do we make it funny? And then at the end of the story, we explain to the audience what's the point. So the moral of the story is, so this story proves. And this is how we form stories when I'm working with my client on a presentation, for example. I'll say, what's the idea we want to deliver? Now, what story can we wrap around that idea that's going to prove the idea's validity and make it unforgettable? And then final
Mm.
touch, cherry on top, where do we get to make this story funny?
The first thing I love is when you said the idea of making it present tense. That's one thing that I haven't really seen other people talk about. And is because you're right, it does actually bring them right to that moment rather than saying 4 years ago I did this. And it sounds more like a biography rather than there I was, as you say, by the side of the road. My feet are soaked from standing in the puddle, I'm freezing, and all I can smell is the exhaust of the cars going by, and I
Yeah,
was trapped. I didn't know whether to jump in front of the traffic or to jump off the cliff beside me. I was lost. and
yeah,
and people are like, wow, that's heavy. And so people are like, okay, now I'm with you at that moment. And then saying, okay, now I'm gonna craft that story. I love how you say sensational because it
hmm
hits all the sensations. And I think it's
hmm
an interesting play on the word of sensational. And I
yeah,
think that's a really something as people are writing their stories, they have to say, is this sensational? Can you feel it, touch it, taste it? Can you be
yeah,
in that moment, in that present moment? And that
yeah,
can really help people connect to that story. I think that is so interesting about storytelling and the way that you've hit that.
yeah.
And so now you've get somebody there and they're like, okay, they've got that story, they know what the outcome needs to be. How do they can take that and they've got their talk and they're getting it now? How do they take it so they can actually convert? Because as you say, the biggest thing is in getting on stage, it's not the speaker fees. That's great. It's a certain noble, it's certainly noble to go after that, and people will pay it and gladly. But you're at that event and you're like, okay, I'm given permission, I can convert off stage. Even if you're not given permission, you have a mechanism for converting, and you can talk a little bit about what that might look like. How do you take all of that and make that into something that actually converts?
So there's a metaphor that would be very helpful. And so imagine there's two islands. One is called Pain Island and one is called Pleasure Islands. And your prospective client is on Pain Island and they want to get to Pleasure Island. And your speech is conveniently titled How to Go from Pain Island to Pleasure Island. And so they think this is the perfect speech for me. And the description of your speech, because by the way, the speech starts even before you get on stage. If they're reading your title and description and bio, they're starting to realize this is for me. This is going to help me get to where I want to go. And your speech first starts by showing what Pain Island's all about. Maybe you've been there before. Certainly you've worked with a lot of people who are there or were there. You get it because you want to create this effect in people where they feel he gets what I'm going through. Man, he gets it so well, right? And in fact, one of the principles of sales and marketing is if you can articulate their problem better than they can, it's implied that you understand and have a solution. And they go, oh, okay, you really get what I'm going through. Okay. So that's describing the pain island. Then describing the pleasure island, they go, yep, that's it. That's what I want right there. That's what I got. That's what I want. Now, your offer is a safe, secure, convenient boat that shuttles people from Pain Island to Pleasure Island so they don't have to try to swim in choppy waters with sharks, all the pitfalls that people might run into trying to do it themselves. That's why they're stuck on Pain Island is they haven't figured out how to build a boat or swim over. You've got the boat that works. Now, what gets people to actually buy a ticket to the boat? Well, have you ever seen a boat shuttle sell tickets that says, my boat runs on diesel and it has 40 seats and it's built out of metal and blah, 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 blah. Nobody talks about the boat when you sell boat tickets. They always talk about the destination. So the destination is life is better, you're more happy, you're making more money, you have better relationships, you're in better health. That's what the ticket to the boat is. It's getting to the destination. So telling stories of how you've shuttled people from Pain Island to Pleasure Island, from the struggle that they're in to the result that they want, and they just need to know that the boat is working and it will work for them. And the way they'll know it'll work for them is you tell stories that make them feel, wow, this person's just like me. The person in the story who's getting this result is just like my situation. So then they understand this boat is for me.
Yeah, that's so important. And I think a lot of people again get lost in the idea of selling the boat. And whether it's on on a stage or on a Zoom call with a client, they get all enamored with the features and everything of their boat that they just want to talk about the engine, they want to talk about how fast it goes, they want to talk about the color, the crew and all that other stuff that goes along with it. And that's like talking about your product. Nobody cares about your product. They care about what does your product, what is the outcome of your product? Where does it take you? And so the idea of saying that, look, you're on Pain Island and being very descriptive about what that is, again, as you say, a sensational description of what Pain Island looks like, and then an even more sensational description of what Pleasure Island looks like. And oh, by the way, we have this thing that'll help you get across, but let's talk about what you're going to do once you get to Pleasure Island. And I think that is something, because most people, what they do is they sell the labor, they don't sell the baby. And people want a baby. They don't want to go through 9 months of hell. And they just want to get that outcome of that child that comes out and, hopefully behaves every once in a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I work with a lot of health practitioners and they want to talk about diet plans and exercise plans. And nobody wants a diet plan and nobody wants an exercise plan. They just want a six pack. Right.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so oftentimes I'm working with doctors, functional medicine doctors on their speeches. And I watch their speech and I go, oh my God, this is like a science class. They're teaching about mitochondria and cells. And so we instead talk about how good it feels to walk down the street and turn heads, and how good it
Mm.
feels to get compliments every day, and how good it feels for people to ask you, wow, what have you been doing? You look younger, you look full of energy. Those stories get people to whip out their credit card and say, sign me up for this program. That's what I want. They want the
Yeah.
outcome. They want the outcome, and they don't necessarily need to understand how it works at the cellular level with the mitochondria and everything else. Some people are really into that. Some people love to learn the science, particularly functional medicine practitioners.
Right.
Ta-da. So we don't have to explain every little detail to our clients. They just need to know the boat works. They need to know that it's going to get the results. And if they want to understand, they can ask. But we put too much detail into the presentation. Instead, let's just tell stories that show the service of the product works.
That makes so many sense. I think the idea of that they don't need everything, because let's face it, they're going to be bombarded with the next speaker. They're going to be bombarded with the next event. They just need to know enough to get that feeling that they know they need to do something. And I know there's a lot of people who've been listening to this podcast and saying, I have that same feeling actually right now. And I want to get started in podcasting, or I want to get started in speaking. I want to get on stages. I want to get my message heard. I've got a value that I need to bring. For them, what is the next step that they could do with you? Like, what would you say if they were going to kind of say, I want to do something, how do I move forward with Majeed?
The best way is to book a one-on-one strategy call with me. You can go to expertspeaker.com/apply. And what we'll do on a one-on-one strategy call is I'll listen to your message, your story, your personal brands, listen to where you want to be speaking on stages, and I'll be able to make recommendations on how to break into that industry, how to use that message to convert. And if it makes sense for us to work together to actually develop your speech and develop your strategy to get on stages, then we can do that. It's a free strategy call, expertspeaker.com/apply.
That sounds amazing. And I think that is so critically important to get that third party opinion on things. I mean, I know when I do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, there's a lot of times I think I'm doing something right, but having somebody third party take a look at things and say, well, I understand that from your perspective, it looks interesting, but from my perspective, here's 2 or 3 things that you can do to fix things. And having that external source really is super valuable. Everybody, in my opinion, no matter what you're doing, you need somebody who's going to coach you through that element, because they're going to give you things that you might not have seen from your perspective. So I think that is a fantastic next thing to do. And so the last thing is for aspiring speakers, one last takeaway that you can give to them that they're going to walk away and say, man, Majeed, this is the guy who knows speaking. What is that one last thing that they need to know as becoming a speaker, or as a speaker who's developing to becoming a next level speaker?
Well, I'll tell you the phrase that I have plastered in front of my desk in my home office, and it says, to speak more, speak more. And that means the more you speak, the more you get to speak. And so the biggest mistake is to wait. Waiting, what are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? I thought I had to publish a
Yep.
book. I took 2 years to write a book, publish the book. That didn't change things for me. I thought I had to build a
Yep.
website, spent all this money on a website. That didn't change things for me. What changed things for me is decided I'm going to speak. I'm going to start offering to speak and asking to speak. And then one speech turns into three speeches, turns into three more speeches. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the massive imperfect action beats perfect planning every single day. And I think
Yeah.
the idea of people just getting out and doing it, you get so much more with doing reps than with planning to do reps at
Oh,
the
yeah.
gym and certainly on the stage. And I think having somebody alongside who can help judge how you're doing the reps will make sure that you're doing reps in the correct way so you're not learning bad habits. And so I think, Majeed, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. I'm excited to continue the relationship. I think we've got so many things that we can do together, with our communities. And dude, it's been an absolute pleasure. Enjoy your time in Guatemala,
Thank you.
and look forward to seeing you at the next event, my man.
Thank you, Steve. Okay. Take care.
And guys, this is the money, this is the mindset, this is the mentoring podcast. We'll see you on the next one.